Over the last couple of days, the Detroit Lions have made a number of changes to their 2024 preseason roster, and in the days to come, we may see a couple of more changes coming to this roster, whether it be signings, releases, waiver wire pickups, tryouts, or just bringing players in for a visit. The Detroit Lions have been looking to change this roster around, add a little bit of depth at certain positions, and bring in players that they feel can compete for the 2024 roster. And today, we're going to take a look at exactly how the Detroit Lions roster has changed over the last couple of days, as well as some of the ways it might change over the next week or so. So with that being said and that being out of the way, let's get in and start off with the Detroit Lions' most recent first-round selection, that, of course, being Terrion Arnold, the Detroit Lions' 24th overall selection from the 2024 NFL class. Terrion Arnold was looked at in this draft as potentially the best cornerback in the draft, with many people projecting him to go anywhere from the 9th overall pick to Atlanta down to about the 15th to 20th overall selection in that range of the draft. However, most people did not see Terrion Arnold falling to the later half of the NFL draft, and many people did not believe that he would be available for either the Detroit Lions or the Philadelphia Eagles with their respective picks. However, due to a historic number of quarterbacks going in the first round, a historic run on offensive players, and a historic non-run on defensive players, Terrion Arnold fell all the way to the 24th overall pick, where the Detroit Lions decided to trade up with the Dallas Cowboys to acquire the Alabama star cornerback. Now, Terrion Arnold played just 2 seasons at Alabama and really only played a starting role in his final season. But in his final year, Terrion Arnold had over 5 interceptions for the Crimson Tide and looked to be one of the best, most fluid and athletic cornerbacks that the NFL draft had to offer. So, with the 24th overall pick, the Detroit Lions selected Terrion Arnold to be a Detroit Lion, and Sub-Zero has officially signed his rookie deal, signing with the Detroit Lions for a 4-year, $14.34 million contract with $7.25 million guaranteed under that deal. Terrion Arnold is officially locked up for the Detroit Lions over the next 4 years, and of course has that 5th-year option to extend on the end as well. And Sub-Zero is officially a licensed member of the Detroit Lions roster. In other news, the Detroit Lions have also made a couple of moves, signing linebacker Benjamin Niemann to a 1-year contract. Benjamin Niemann is a longtime NFL veteran with 86 games of experience under his belt, over 200 tackles at the linebacker position, playing with Kansas City, Arizona, and most recently with the Denver Broncos. He's a player that was brought in to, I think, bring some special teams depth, bring some versatility, bring a little bit of that veteran leadership to what is realistically a very young linebacking core, right? You have Jack Campbell going into his 2nd year. You have Derek Barnes, who's still on a rookie contract. You have Malcolm Rodriguez, who is still on a rookie contract. You have Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who I believe is only 27, I believe 5 years into his NFL career, as well as Alex Anzalone, who I believe is now onto his 5th or 6th year as well. All of their linebackers are still relatively young. Most of them don't have very much playoff experience, and Ben Newman has a little bit more experience, brings a little bit more of that veteran presence to the team. However, despite him doing so, I don't necessarily see him sticking around for very long. This seems to be, hey, this is a guy that could help out the young players, a guy that could kind of teach Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes and Malcolm Rodriguez a thing or two, something that maybe Alex Anzalone just hasn't seen. Maybe Alex Anzalone just doesn't know. Maybe Jalen Reeves-Maybin just hasn't seen in the NFL. And I think this is much more of a Christian Covington-esque move for the Detroit Lions, a preseason player, a more players coach, if you will, to bring in, teach the younger guys some things, but potentially not make the roster unless there's an injury or unless something unforeseen happens. I just think the Lions linebacking core is very, very strong. I don't see a whole lot of room to break through that wall and break into the NFL roster, with, of course, Campbell, Anzalone, Barnes, Rodriguez, and Jalen Reeves-Maybin almost all being locks for this roster. I just don't see them carrying 6 linebackers at a time, and unfortunately, that means that Ben Newman probably will not make the active roster. But of course, with Ben Newman officially signing with the Detroit Lions, that means that one player had to be cut. And unfortunately for the Detroit Lions fandoms, arguably the best named player on the roster, Steel Chambers, the undrafted rookie free agent from Ohio State University, has been cut by the Detroit Lions. He is a player that was an active member of the OSU defense for the last couple of years, one of their leaders, one of their captains, one of their most statistically impressive players on that top rushing defense in the country. He was a player that was active throughout OTAs, was participatory in every single player and every single camp that he was attending, but he just didn't seem to stand out to the Detroit Lions, whether it be a lack of coverage ability, whether it be his skill set already being covered by another linebacker, or just the fact that they wanted a veteran presence over an undrafted rookie free agent. They officially waived Steel Chambers the moment that they signed Ben Newman, but it's not all doom and gloom for Steel Chambers, as he has officially been claimed off the waiver wire by the New England Patriots. So he will be attending training camp for them throughout this summer, as well as having an opportunity to potentially make that roster. And I do think it's a good thing for him. I do think that Steel Chambers is going to fit with New England, the way that they run their defense, the way that, they like the bigger linebackers that can get sideline to sideline and tackle, sacrifice a little bit of that versatility, sacrifice a little bit of that coverage ability for a guy that is big, fast, and can stop the run. I think he fits really well with what the New England Patriots are building on defense. I think he does have a chance to make the roster there as well. But unfortunately, after signing with the Detroit Lions in April, he is officially no longer a member of the team. In other news, the Detroit Lions have tried out and they've brought in UFL Kicker of the Year, Jake Bates, for an official visit. Now, it is worthy to note that Jake Bates was not brought in for a tryout. He did not kick for the Detroit Lions, and I do not know if he is kicking for the other teams that he is visiting, but he has gotten a lot of work as well. He is interviewing and visiting with the Green Bay Packers, the Baltimore Ravens, as well as the Detroit Lions. Of course, Jake Bates a year ago kicking for the Michigan Panthers in the UFL, kicking almost every week at Ford Field and being one of the best and most sensational players in the UFL. I believe he finished third in MVP voting as a kicker, which just shows how valuable he was to the Michigan Panthers. But unfortunately, Jake Bates did have kind of a slow end to his UFL career, finishing just 17 of 22 from the field goal, missing one kick from 30 to 39 yards, but having every other kick being made within that 50-yard range. 4 of his misses came from 50 plus yards. And the only other miss that he had on the year was, again, that one from 30 to 39. However, Jake Bates made 6 kicks from 50 plus and had 4 game-winning kicks from 50 plus. I believe 2 of those kicks being 60 plus yard bombs. He is a player with a big leg, with good accuracy, a player that has been super consistent and super clutch. And unfortunately, he actually, I believe, went 3 for 7 outdoors, which is a little bit concerning, but that means he was nearly perfect at Ford Field for the time that he was there. And again, 17 of 22 isn't a great field goal percentage, isn't a great kicking percentage, but considering he kicked 10 from 50 plus and hit those 50 plus yards at 60%, and I believe hit these 60 plus yards at 2 for 2 100% of the time, there is a reason that Jake Bates is getting a lot of looks from NFL teams. There is a reason that Jake Bates will probably be kicking in the NFL this year. There's always an opportunity for him to kick for the Detroit Lions. James Tucker, the undrafted rookie free agent from Michigan, is already having a really good camp. Michael Badgley was really good for the Lions down the stretch last year as well in 2022. So there is some kicking competition now in Detroit, but I do think there is a good opportunity for Jake Bates to potentially try out for this roster, to potentially work out for this roster, and whether or not he makes the roster is, of course, yet to be seen in the preseason. But I do think he could push both James Turner as well as Michael Badgley for that spot and potentially at least make the practice squad if he can be a little bit more consistent than Michael Badgley. Again, a little bit inconsistent outdoors, isn't as good within the elements, but considering the Detroit Lions play just 3 outdoor games this year in the regular season and don't play one until week, I believe, 14 of the NFL season, that could be really good news for Jake Bates, who gets to kick inside a lot with Detroit, who gets to kick long field goals potentially and be trusted with that responsibility and potentially be a very big impact player within the NFL. We already know he can kick bombs at Ford Field. He can probably do so at other NFL stadiums as well. In other news, not so much roster news, but just other good news from around the league to kind of, end the video on a positive note. Former Detroit Lions quarterback Adrian Martinez has officially won the UFL MVP. He is a player that led the UFL in rushing yards a season ago, and he's a player that is a very dynamic weapon at quarterback. A runner, a good passer. I know he did get benched in the UFL championship game because he wasn't having a strong game, but overall the entire season he had a strong performance I thought was pretty good for the Detroit Lions in the preseason a year ago. A guy that now that the UFL season is officially over could potentially be a player the Lions look to bring back, if nothing else for a camp body if nothing else, to be that fourth string quarterback for the preseason. I know they had a couple of quarterbacks last year. They went with Jared Goff and Nate Sudfeld and David Blau and Adrian Martinez. So they could potentially be looking to carry 4 quarterbacks into the preseason. As of right now, have just Goff, Sudfeld, and Hooker. Could potentially be looking for that depth quarterback option, at least for the preseason. Get Martinez some looks in the NFL again, and potentially give him an opportunity to make the practice squad. A player that the Lions brought in for a top 30 visit out of college, a player that they played a lot throughout the preseason, the guy that I thought at least showed some pretty good flashes at the NFL level for the preseason. So a guy that potentially could be looked out for on the roster, a guy that could potentially be a camp body or a preseason player. But again, just some fun news and something to look forward to as a Detroit Lions fan, and something to potentially speculate about. But with all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. That is the updated signings, releases, cuts, and visits for the Detroit Lions. All the roster news that you need to know has been talked about. And if there's any more roster news throughout this week, of course, we will come back and speak about it. With all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. If you have gotten this far in the video and enjoy the content, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for daily Detroit Lions content. With all of that being said, that is all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.